Hi, I'm still B. Rogers from 44 Pearl Road. And I would like to raise a completely different question. In your pie chart for this requested full override, 58% of the $1 million is requested for these additional staff at the fire department. And if I'm not mistaken, 58% is not $1 million, it's 580,000, which, and another, I can't remember right now, but 35 or 40% was to fund additional training and staff, I believe, in the school. And I would love to, well, I'd love to be able to vote separately on the uses because I think they're worthy of separate consideration. But I would like to hear more about the justification for that additional several $100,000, a few $100,000 to be spent. We've spent a lot of time on the fire, and as I say, that, from what I understand, is 58% of this budget. So we don't, of this proposed override. So I would love to hear some discussion about that.
Very good point. So while we have had a lot of discussion about the fire department staff that makes up the $1 million override, there are other components to it. As we heard, it would be increasing a part-time school staff from a 0.37 FTE to a 1.0 FTE, and that's an ELA math specialist in the school department. The $1 million override also includes increasing, sorry, I just put a lifesaver into my mouth, 5 non-union, non-contract salaries to market rates. The town undertook a salary study a few years ago, and it was determined that a lot of our non-contract, non-union employees are paid under market rates. So the $1 million override, I've bumped up those salaries to market rates. It includes the treasurer, it includes the town clerk, it includes the administrative assistant for the building department, and it also includes 2 library employees. The $1 million override also includes an increase in part-time staff salaries. From traditionally, we've bumped those by 25 cents per hour per year. I'm proposing to increase it by 50 cents per hour per year. So that's a lot of our DPW staff is part-time. Our entire Council on Aging staff is part-time. So it would be those positions. Yep, do you have a question?
Thank you for explaining that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I haven't heard is that you've talked about the other salaries, but what I understood was the school specifically is asking for additional staff and additional training, and that's 20% of the $1 million that's being requested. So I understand what you're saying about other salaries, but I'd love to hear some explanation for the portion that the school is asking.
Yep, so I talked about the increase of 1 FTE for the school, their ELA math specialist, so that also is inclusive. We have to budget for health insurance benefits for that individual as well. And also the school budget, that percentage increase under the $1 million scenario includes professional development costs. But I'm also talking about the other pieces that are involved in the override as well. The override also includes transferring $56,000 to the town stabilization fund, which hasn't been done in 2 years. And I'm also included an increase to debt service payments so that we can pay down debt and not incur interest costs in later years. So both overrides are the same, include all those aspects. The only differences between the two is the fire department budget. as has been proposed. Yes. We have the superintendent of schools here too, so he can talk about the school.
Thank you, everyone, very much for allowing me to speak as a non-resident. It's a wonderful town here, and tremendous employees, tremendous representatives. I'd just take 10 seconds to thank both Zach, Austin, and Tim. They are about as highly professional as you possibly can get, totally dedicated to their service to the town, and as an outsider, I recognize that, so you should appreciate that tremendously. For the school section of the override, it's $191,245, roughly $200,000. The first item is for an increase in the present ELL math interventionist from a approximately one-third time individual, the rest of the time she's a preschool teacher, to go to a full-time interventionist to help out non-special education students that struggle with both math and English. In the recent state testing that was conducted in the state, the number of students by percent that partially meet the standard, meaning they're close, is 39% in English. In Nahant, it's 47% that are close and partially meet. In math, you've seen the exact same relationship. In the state, it's 40% that partially meet, and in Nahant, it's 46%. So these are non-special ed students that partially meet, that are almost in the meet category. With that little extra help, individually and in small groups, I'm confident that they can be pushed from the partially meet section into the meet section. And I've done this for 50 years. Kids, as far as I'm concerned, are any town's greatest resource. They get one shot at it. And what they get for their services, once you're behind, it's very, very difficult to catch up. So these are non-special ed kids that don't necessarily get any services, that with this extra little boost, and it's $79,000 of that 191, I'm confident that will help move those kids from partially meets into meets. I also think it will help move the kids that already meet into the exceed category. We have a lower number of kids that exceed the standard than in the state. And I feel that those kids with a little bit extra challenge and push will be moved into the exceeds column. The next item, and it's a small item, is a $6,000 increase in the 191, and that accounts for increased professional development for our staff. We have a young staff now. A lot of the wonderful older teachers have left, and younger teachers have replaced them. We have replaced our math program that was out of date and not up to DESE standards, and those teachers need to be trained in that. It's as if you bought a new GPS for your boat and nobody showed you how to use it. It becomes ineffective when you have to find your way. So for teachers, they get a new program. You have to invest in the professional development for those staff members, and that's a $6,000 item. We also were very, very fortunate to receive an $80,000 donation for a greenhouse last year that we've been working with our kids on, and there's a $5,600 stipend for the individual that oversees the greenhouse. That was not in last year's budget, so therefore that is an increase and has to go into the override budget. The final one is quite complicated to explain, but it's a reduction in our dependency on something called circuit breaker for special education students. Every year we have a number of students that are outplaced in other locations than Nahant because of their unique needs that they have for learning. And the state helps you with that, but they help you a year later, and they reimburse at 75% of what you invest for tuition and hopefully 75% of what you invest for transportation. They haven't been meeting the transportation amount. So when we built our budget to be level service, we were including the use of $350,000 of our circuit breaker account. And that puts us in a fail-safe situation where at the end of next year, if we had no new students and no change in placement, that fund would be down to less than $100,000. And I would argue that is not a sufficient amount to have. You can't hoard that money. That money has to be spent within 2 years. So you've got to apply it at one time or another to your special ed costs. But getting below that $100,000 mark was not prudent in my mind. So by going to the use of $250 again, we used $150 last year, that will keep the balance in circuit breaker to account for a change in placement. That might be an increase of $100,000 for one student. There are presently 12 students who are in out-of-district placements in the town of Nahant. There were 9 last year. And each placement is easily over $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000. So that's actually the biggest number, but it's reducing our dependence on a savings account that the state hopefully funds if they have the money available. So I feel that our kids are a tremendous investment. They are the future, and Austin did a wonderful job. He says he's not a good public speaker, but I've been convinced that he is. So I've also learned in 50 years that kids don't have a voice. They don't have a say. They don't have a vote. We have to speak for our children, and I think our kids are worth the investment. So thank you very much for your time and allowing me to speak.